Hello and welcome everyone, it is Flame from Team Legends and welcome to the first of our deck discussion videos here on the Legends of UA channel. These videos are designed to give an in-depth analysis on every deck in the game of Union Arena, as well as some tips and tricks for players who might be considering picking up the deck. After the card by card, we will be taking the deck into a randomly generated 3-round tournament to see just how well it can do against other decks in the game. So without further ado, I introduce to you Green Buddies. Green Buddies was a deck that first came to be when Hunter x Hunter Volume 2 was released back in 2025. It is a further upgraded deck of the original Hunter x Hunter starter deck that was released when the game first came out in the United States in October of 2024. Unfortunately, that's all the deck was back when it was first released, as it was also one of the first decks that was released in Japan when the game was first created. All of that changed, however, when Volume 2 gave the Green deck a brand new avenue in focusing on the main 4 characters of the Hunter x Hunter series. The central strategy of the Green Gon deck soon changed into something that, likewise to Jujutsu Kaisen Volume 2, focused on a brand new strategy, and that was names. What I mean by names is the fact that you had to have certain characters on the board at the same time in order to resolve different effects. This was never the case for Hunter x Hunter when it first came out in Volume 1, as it was just a main centralized focus around Gon getting ridiculously large amounts of BP. We'll now break down the deck going through the card by card, starting of course with the all-important zeros, and there is none that is more important to the centralized focus of the deck than of course the 0-1 Gon Freeccs. Gon of course is a mandatory 4-of in this deck specifically because he is a raid target and a 0 with a get trigger, which in the early stages having a good card and a good 0 with a trigger was very hard to come by. Pretty sure your 0 choices back then were either Mito, Captain of the Ship, or Sato's. Another mandatory 4-of in this deck is of course the all-important draw discard on the 0 trigger, which in this instance is the 0-1 Zeppiel. Now, Zeppiel is not a main centralized focus of the deck as he is not a Killua, a Leorio, or a Kurapika name, but you do need to have this to go through your deck as searching in this deck is not exactly its forte. So having this 0-1 standard draw discard on a draw trigger as well is pretty powerful. 2 more zeros that I put into this deck are 2 of the 0-1 Kurapikas. This deck is only playing 2 of the 0-1 Kurapikas specifically because we are playing 8 total Kurapika names, and any more than that would just throw off the ratios of any of the other names that we have to find in the deck, so I think 2 is just the best number for the deck. The last zeros we're bringing into this deck to round out our total of 12 zeros is of course 2 of the 0-1 Killuas. Now this is an interesting choice just because of the fact that the 0-1 Killua does not have a trigger, but is remedied by the fact that he is a 2000 stepper. For the 1 cost cards in the deck, we are only going to be playing 4 of them, and it happens to be 4 of the 1-1 Kurapikas. Freshly introduced out of Hunter x Hunter Volume 2, this 1-1 Kurapika definitely helps out in a much needed draw trigger for the deck, as well as a good target to play off of a green color, and is all around just a solid 2500 on top of being a Kurapika name that you need for the deck. Moving on to the 2 cost cards in the deck, we are only going to be playing 4 2 cost cards, and it is 4 of the 2-1 Killua Zoldyck. On top of an active trigger, which is already very strong for the deck, as BP focus is one of the main strategies of this deck, the Killua is designed to have those early versatilities that you can play him on your second turn. If you have a back row of exactly Gon and Kurapika, which are both 0 and 1 cost, you can lay him on the front row and he can protect you as a 3000 body, or you can simply throw him down for 1 AP, switches himself to active, and you're already swinging a 3000 body without having to wait the turn for him to go active. Rounding out cards that you might see on the energy line, we are playing 4 copies of this Leorio. Hear me out for the reasoning for it. Leorio himself is a double energy generator and doesn't need to be on the front line in order for the deck to gain any power. He is also an active trigger and a name, so you don't necessarily need to move him to the front row at any point, and if you find him in your life, he still is going to help you out with an active trigger versus just not being able to do anything with the next Leorio, of course being the only other one in this deck in the 3-1 that was released back in Volume 2. Similar to all the other ones that were released back in the second wave, this Leorio focuses on having the right number of Gons, Killuas, and Kurapikas on the field at the same time. He, however, does not need to have as many as the Killua does in order to gain his effects. If Leorio is on the board and you have just 1, he generates energy even if he's on the front line. So if at any point you get him on, say, your 3rd turn, you can throw him up as a 3000 blocker on the front line, and as long as you have either one of those 3 names sitting on the back row, you are then generating 4 energy. If you do manage to stick all 3 names on the board at one time, the Leorio does get a 1000 BP boost during your turn. Doesn't come up very often, but it is still nice to have a 4000 body if you meet all the steep requirements. Rounding out our 3 cost cards, we are going to be playing 4 copies of the 3/1 Gon that was released back in the starter deck in 2024. As well as being an active trigger, this Gon gains impact if he happens to have over 4000 BP. You can just use the Raid Gon, either of the Raid Gons, and you will get that 4000 BP boost to give him the much needed impact to make an aggressive swing. For the 4 costs of the deck, we will be playing 2 copies of the 4/1 Kurapika. Likewise to the Killua and the Leorio that were released alongside of it, this Kurapika focuses on having the correct number of Gons, Killuas, and Leorios on your field with different names at the same time. Being a 4 cost, it is going to take a little longer for him to drop on the board. If you have just one of the other names, when played, you can choose a character with 2500 or specifically a Phantom Troop affinity of any kind and switch it to resting. If you do get 2 or more when attacking, you're able to draw a discard. On top of it being a draw trigger, which is just very powerful in this deck as it is, the Kurapika is a solid choice, but me personally, I wouldn't play it any more than 2. Just 2500 BP resting is not exactly the most powerful, especially when you're going to be dropping him in late game states. Moving on to the card that has changed the playstyle of this deck, the 4/1 Color Gon. This Gon was a much needed replacement for the original Color Gon that was back in Volume 1, and it really started to mold the deck into the Green Buddy strategy that we see today. This Gon, of course, getting its abilities based on if you have the correct number of Killuas, Karapikas, and Leorios on your board at the same time with different names. If you have just one of them during your turn, gets 1000 BP, so he goes up to 5k. 2 or more, he gets impact, and if you happen to get the trifecta of unique names on your board at the same time when you play him, you can pay an additional AP to swap him active. For the raids, we are of course playing 4 copies of the main character of the deck, 4 copies of the Raid Gon. Now this Gon is very powerful and can get your cards to ridiculous amounts of BP. When played, you can choose up to 2 characters on the board and they both gain 1000 BP, including the Raid Gon, so on play he can become a 5000 BP. He can also utilize this ability when attacking, and you can boost other characters on your board that might not be able to hit over those 4k blockers in order to get them to astronomical heights. This card is also powerful to hit out of life, as his when played ability will still activate. You are able to then boost him up to 5k, and you are able to boost any of your other defenders that you might be trying to block with up to a suitable number, and could potentially spare another one of your characters instead of losing them to be just 1000 points stronger and protect them from being sidelined. To round out the raids, we of course are playing 2 copies of the 5/1 Gon Freeccs that was released back in the starter deck. This Gon is the justification as to why we are playing so many copies of the double energy generating Leorio, as you need to get up to 5 energy to play this card. This card, when played, gives all characters on your front line an 1000 BP boost until the end of the turn. So likewise to the other Raid Gon, he already becomes a 5k impact, as well as boosting everything else on your front line to astronomical numbers. For the event in this deck, we are of course playing 4 copies of the Fishing Rod special card, which is a very resourceful card, especially given this deck strategy. Unlike the specials that are being released nowadays, which is straight 5000 out, the Fishing Rod has an ability to do something even better than that, and it sideline things with even more BP. You choose one character in your opponent's front line with BP equal to or less than the highest BP of characters on your field, and you bounce it back to their hand. Of course, if you have Gon, sideline it instead. This, of course, is a very dangerous special. If you have the right BP on your board, you can sideline something 5 or even 6,000 BP. But if you don't, it will be very challenging to out cards with over 4000 BP. Now, albeit there aren't very many of them in the game, but it is always important to have that ability to out something with up to 5k that a lot of the decks nowadays are just taking for granted. And of course, rounding out our event cards, we are playing 4 copies of Hunter License. You want to play as many as you can, especially as you're going to be relying on your life a lot with the green deck to keep your characters alive. So once again, here is the full breakdown of the deck list, as well as the ratios that every card is going to be played at, and we'll see just how well we can do. We now turn our attention to the all-knowing wheel of Union Arena decks to see what decks we'll have facing off against our brand new Green Buddies deck here today. First unlucky victim is the Yellow Eraser deck from Hunter x Hunter Volume 2. The deck that a lot of people question was ever made to be a very viable and competitive deck. The Razor deck cannot get impact, it cannot get damage to, it does not have double attack. The only thing it has going for it is that every Razor name, except for the base raid, the 1/1 Razor, has Nullify Impact on it, which in this very specific matchup is very strong for the deck because all of the Gons can only get impact, so it will be impact versus Nullify Impact. However, against any other deck in the format, this deck really doesn't do enough for it. The only thing it has going other than that is the fact that it can swarm the board with the Razor's Nen Beast, which are being played right now. 2 of them. You can play up to 14 copies of Razor's Nen Beast in the deck. And it's often joked that Nen Beast walk so that the Shadow Soldiers and the Loki from Code Geass Rose of the Recapture could run. The Razor's Nen Beast, of course, having the get trigger on 14 cards in the deck. So 14 get triggers on top of your raid, and the 1/1 have get triggers. And it was one of the only ones, comparatively to the Shadow Soldiers and to the Loki from Rose of the Recapture, that actually has the get trigger on the zeros instead of a draw trigger. I believe the officials over at Union Arena HQ found out that, hey, maybe we can put a draw trigger on these cards and they'd actually be good. So your opponent activating Razor and his 14 Devils let you go top 5 to search any 2 Nen Beast and Razor affinities. He grabbed the Color Razor as well as the 3/1 Razor with Nullify Impact, just fortifying the front line with Nen Beasts. And now at this point, the strength of the Buddies deck can start to take hold. We already have 3 of the necessary names on the board, just missing the Leorio, but filling up the back row with a lot of cheap cards and swinging for damage. Getting 1 out of the way, and the Nen Beast triggers that when sidelined, you're able to stack it under another Nen Beast affinity on the card. Just goes for the back row Nen Beast and pass turn. Already up on life, 7/2/6, decides to move the Razor up to the front line, which Razor during your turn gets a BP boost. If you have a certain number of Nen Beast affinity cards and face down cards on the field, they get 1,000. The combined total needs to be 2 or more on your field. So currently that Razor is sitting at a 3K, just fortifying the back row and spiking the Killua out of spite, so to speak. Trying to swing some early damage with Nen Beast obviously getting over the Zeppiel, but an active trigger will preserve life, so 1 damage apiece on both sides. Now passes back to our Green Buddies deck. Taking the AP draw here, obviously very cheap deck, so you can afford to take those extra draws and moving the Killua and the Gon up to the front line, and just refueling the back row with another Killua and an Impact Gon. It is 3 bodies to 2. 15 Zeppiel swinging first, going to be blocked by the 2,000 Razor. Killua will get in for damage, obviously no trigger on the number 13. And whether or not this 3,000 Gon will get through, he does not get impact unless he gets that additional 1,000 BP to put him up to 4K. Just simply going to block with the Nen Beast and pass turn. Already stacking 2 under the Nen Beast in the back row. Razor is still at 3K, and now some Nen Beast will start to make some move up to the front line. They gain 1,000 BP for every face down card underneath them, as is the case with every Nen Beast affinity card. It's really the sole focus of the deck is to let the Nen Beast die and go to the sideline, and then they get stacked underneath the other Nen Beasts on the field to make them stronger. Obviously want to play a more aggressive and reckless style as you're going to be throwing Nen Beasts on the front line. As we see the 4/2 Razor drop, when played, you can sideline another Nen Beast affinity on the field, and then you target any card on your opponent's front line and switch it resting, and remain set to resting next time you switch active. Decides to go after the Zeppiel instead, as it was going to be a cheap blocker, and on top of that, also gets to restand an AP, which when you sideline one of Razor's Nen Beasts, you're then able to stack it under another one on your field, so very powerful turn in order to boost that Nen Beast up to a 3,500 swing on a 0. 3,000 Razor going to swing and hit a green color trigger Gon out of life, allowing a free play of the Kurapika that we had waiting in our hand, and simply can make a cheap block, as we don't necessarily need any more Kurapikas. We already have 1 sitting on the back row, and don't necessarily need any more as we are going through this game. The fact that you already get 1 on the board with 1 Kurapika and 1 Killua, as long as they live in the back row, you have nothing to worry about, as your opponent, and specifically with a Razor deck here, does not have any ability to go after the back row. Go for an extra draw here, and a little bit of movement phase as the 0/1 Killua has step, and we did find our last name, the Leorio, and drop the Raid 5/1 Gon, which on play gives everything on the front line a 1,000 point boost. So we were looking at a 5,000 impact Raid Gon and 2 4,000 impact 3/1 Gons. Just checking with the opponent on the Razor, as His ability is a very interesting one at that, and only comes up in this specific scenario. The Color Razor, that when blocking, if it is specifically blocking something coming in with impact, he goes from a 4,000 blocker to a 6,000 blocker, and then can preserve life. Obviously, hitting the active trigger out of life definitely saved a little bit of damage there. And we hit a Raid Gon out of life after getting the Raid Razor dropped and just absolutely annihilating the 5-1 Gon. But a Raid out of life definitely is going to be helpful, as it boosts the BP of not only the Raid Gon, but the other Gon as well. And Zepio will be sidelined. Pretty back and forth matchup, but the Razors on the front line starting to be a little bit of an issue, as they have the Nullify Impact, which keeps the 3-1 Gon in check. Moving Killua up to the front line, as we already have our back row established of Killua, Gon, and Leorio. Play the Leorio on the front line, which he's able to generate energy if he is sitting on the front line. And also when attacking, or during your turn, gains an additional 1,000 BP if you have all three of the other ones on the field. Fortunately, going to run into a yellow color trigger, which is going to rest the impact Gon. And we'll be able to get any more damage in. Just taking one shot at a time here, but the Razors' Nen Beast can obviously replace themselves. Sole focus is trying to find that dodgeball court in the deck so you can replay your Nen Beast back to the field so they can get sidelined once again. Already number 13 on the front line, a 4K, as it has another one underneath it. Razor swinging in, dealing the damage. Another 4K coming in off of the number 13, which will be blocked out by the Killua. And then the rest will just be blocked out, as the other number 13 closest to the deck does not have any face down cards underneath it, so it's simply just 3,000. Holding the Hunter license in hand the entire time, we did not find really any need for it, as when we play the Killua, if you have all three of the required names on the board, one plate switches itself active, and now just Fishing Rod outing the Raid Razor. And unfortunate, hitting a special out of life is going to take care of the impact Gon once again. One of the only things that could be able to get through and turn the tide of the battle in our favor, but was not meant to be. And the Leorio, as we mentioned earlier, a 4,000 swinger is just going to be able to out the Nen Beast, and will stack under the number 13, so that'll be a 4K on the opponent's turn. And once again, another Nen Beast hit out of life. So it is down to the last life for Razor, and we're sitting comfortably with our life and situation right now, but the strength of the Razor deck is able to go the distance here with playing a lot more bodies on the boards. They could just be free replacements. Number 13 swinging in 4K is going to hit a draw trigger down to just 2 life for the Green Buddies deck. And going to hit a very fortunate green color trigger out of life again to free play a Gon. And it will just be blocked out. The key here is going to be finding the last impact necessary to end the game, as nothing on the board has Nullify Impact, but unfortunately you can't get it this turn. And so this turn is just going to be meant to fortify the defenses with the Leorio, and then another one on the back row to replace him. So nothing getting through here. It's going to be having to be blocked out the entire time. As the Gon attacks, is going to give everything the BP boost. 4,000 Leorio. 4,000 Killua, and then the Gon won't get through. So praying the opponent does not find any source of removal, whether it's through a spike or the Raid Razor, to overwhelm the board. Taking the extra draw, very fortunate. We do see a dodgeball court in the hand, as it's going to be moved up to the front line, both the Razor and the Nen Beast, as well as the other Razor, already generating 2, so there's the dodgeball court. As switching to resting is able to stack a Nen Beast from the sideline under another Nen Beast on the field. So that's going to go under Razor's Nen Beast, and then a search off of number 0, which would have been a little bit of a misplay, played in the wrong order. Number 0 would have been able to get a good search off, but instead is just going to add and immediately throw the Razor into the sideline, which the Razor will then sideline, set number 0, draw a card, and then get a 1,000 BP boost. So sitting at 4,500, 3, 35, 45, and 4. Very dangerous situation, having to block out almost everything on the board here. And what can we get to end this game? Something has to be done. Only a Hunter license and a Leorio in hand, and that is the ticket we needed, as it was a blink you miss it moment. Drew the 4-1 Karapika, which in this instance actually will help out win the game, as Leorio generating on the front line, able to play that. and then drop the 4-1 Kurapika that when played is able to take anything with 2500 or less BP, switch it resting, and that should just end the game. Our next matchup with the perfect 1-0 record to see if Hunter x Hunter Green Buddies has what it takes to go the distance will be yet another Hunter x Hunter matchup. This one going all the way back in time to an early deck, the Purple Phantom Troop deck, that also got some brand new support out of Hunter x Hunter Volume 2, but it wasn't exactly the best type of support. It got a few new powerhouse cards in the 4-1 Crollo as well as the 5-1 Hisoka, but it also got a couple cards that really wasn't asking for it. Double energy generating Shalnarg and a Nobunaga and Maki that puts blanket protection on the board, but doesn't have that crucial when played effect that the Phantom Troop deck was looking for through the entirety of its lifespan. It's the fact that the Crollo is able to copy all the when played effects on the board, so you can take advantage of using cards like Shizuku to draw an extra card, Vinx to draw a discard, Shalnarg to play one back from your sideline, or Franklin or Nobunaga to lower the BP of your opponent's characters on the front line, so you're able to deal a little bit more damage. Deck is playing a few more extra copies of Pakinoda as you see moving up to the front line, as Pakinoda is a card that doesn't necessarily have a trigger on a 0, but does have an effect that when sideline is able to draw a card, so moving her up to the front line early on is able to be beneficial for a Phantom Troop player, as they will be able to make a free block, and they'll be able to get resources off of that block as well as preserving life. Already started with a lot of Gons in hand, and specifically color Gons at that. Unfortunately, without all three names, the Kurapika, Leorio, and Killua will not be able to pay the additional AP to switch the character active when played to be a 5,000 impact on swing. Just going to fortify the front line with the color Gon as well as the Leorio, who's going to be generating energy on the front line. Leorio only needing one other character between Gon, Kurapika, and Killua in order to generate energy on the front line is very powerful, especially being on a 3,000 body. He could just sit on the front line for as long as necessary, and as long as you have enough energy, like the double energy Leorio in the back row, he can stay there as long as need be. See now, Phantom Troop is starting to move a little bit more pieces forward. Unfortunately, they're not strong enough to hit over the early establishment of the color Gon and the Leorio, as Leorio sits at 3k and the Gon sits at 4, and now passes turn. Have two specials in hand as well as two color Gons and a final Hunter's License as well. Just going to spend the turn by raiding the Gon, and is going to boost the Leorio and itself up to 4 and 5k respectively. Leorio does not get the during your turn BP boost unless you have all three of the names on the board, and since we don't have the Killua, he's just going to be a 4,000 body when attacking. But the color Gon does have impact, as it only needs 2 cards on the board between Kurapika and Leorio in order to get that much needed impact. If you have one, it's just going to be able to get to 5k, but the second one does get impact. So already a very early establishment, staring down 2 impact Gons, as well as the other Gon, the raid, to make everything on the front line huge. Already a very bad situation for the Phantom Troop deck, as both Requiems in the sideline, free playing back a Finks off of the Shalnark effect, is able to play back any Phantom Troop affinity with 3 or less required energy and 1 AP cost. So cards like the Uvogin or the Phaeton are not viable under the Shalnark trigger, as they are both over the required energy. They're 4, and in the Phaeton's case is a 4/2 card on double energy generator. We now see the brand new Hisoka dropping on the board that when played, as long as your opponent is holding 3 or more cards in their hand, they have to mandatorily discard a card of their choice. So already getting rid of a fishing rod special card, as we already had another one waiting in hand. So not necessarily the biggest detriment to pitch it away, and it's just going to take care of the Hisoka as the only strong one over 3,000 BP on the board. Gon will be swinging in, and it will be 5k impact on both of the colors, and the Leorio swinging in will be 4,000 on top of the Raid Gon being 5,000. Unfortunate, a special hit out of life is going to take out one of the impacts, but another one will be able to sink in and deal some damage. Already putting Phantom Troop on the back foot, no Raid Crollos, which is another impact getter, and hasn't been seen yet. The problem with the color Crollo that's established on the front line is it's able to search any Phantom Troop card in the deck, but you're not able to search Crollo himself. Just going to grab a copy of Franklin there, and of course, if you add a card, you have to discard. Pitching off a dead Pakanota. The hand is Shalnark, Hisoka, and Franklin. Franklin, when played, is going to drop everything on the front line's BP by 500, so they would theoretically be able to be swung over. But Shalnark is the only one with the correct BP, and realizing that, just not going to go to attack, as both Gons at 3,500 and the Leorio at 2,500 would easily be able to block out. Something we've noticed a lot through this gameplay is that the fact of the Green Buddies deck is able to take advantage of the extra draw. The fact that the deck only has to get up to 5 required energy means that it doesn't take a lot to replenish its back row. So taking the extra draw to get even more resources, and even in this instance to move up a double energy generator and only play 2 cards, is definitely one of the strengths of this deck. The problem it gets is that if your deck you're facing has a heavy removal, you're going to be replacing a lot more cards than you may have initially wanted to. It's going to swing, and yet another special hit out of life is going to take care of our second color Gon. We still have one more waiting in the back row to move up to the front line whenever is necessary. And this is where Phantom Troop starts to get a little more dangerous in the late game stages. You have the Raid Crollo able to copy the effect of the Franklin to drop everything on the front line by 500. Then you activate the Shalnark effect to free play one Phantom Troop member back from the sideline. The line is full, so it will be a Pakanota that's played on the back row. And interestingly enough, she does trigger off of her effect. And during the end phase, the Shalnark mandatorily sidelines the card it brings back that was resting. Usually you'd bring back a Crollo as a raid target or any other Phantom Troop member to get their when played ability. But in this instance, it is going to be the Pakanota that at the end of the turn, after generating a little bit of energy, is going to sideline herself, and then you are able to draw a card off of her effect. Taking a little bit of damage there as the Crollo now has impact, and board finally starting to solidify itself for the Phantom Troop deck. We are able to move our green Gon up to the front line, and then a Zep heal to draw a discard. We drew into yet another raid Gon, and the question is whether or not to play him on the board, as we already have enough in terms of BP prowess to take the early swings and hit over everything. In this instance, we are just going to go to combat phase, leaving one AP stranded. Something you really don't want to do at any point is you want to maximize and play as many cards and all of your cards as possible. Just leaving that one action point stranded may come back to bite us in the end, but right now it's just going to be swinging over everything. Impact will get through, and a draw trigger off the core Topi brings Phantom Troop down to just 1 life remaining. Of course, that is a guaranteed impact on the Kroll that will be swinging in on the following turn. Going to be moving a few cards up, already generating 2 off of the Shalnark sitting in the back row. Fangs is going to draw a discard. We see another Shalnark waiting in the hand. And is likely going to drop here, as it is, to free play another troop member back on the very full sideline from Phantom Troop. And once again, it is going to be Franklin to drop everything on the front line by 500, making it easily able to be swung over by other cards. The first time we're seeing the brand new Crollo, and is going to search Franklin, which upon searching, you discard a card, and if you happen to discard a Phantom Troop member with the correct required energy, you are able to take advantage of its when played abilities, so the Franklin getting played again drops everything on the front line by 1,000. Of course, hitting a raid Gon out of life is going to boost them back up to their original BP, and we're only going to lose 1 character off of that skirmish. Draw into a Karapika, and I believe it's another Leorio, and it is. So just replenishing the back row once again with yet another Leorio, and now it's just swing for the last impact, but a final keeps Phantom Troop in the game, and a very crucial final at that, as they only need 1 more Crollo, because I believe we're at 2 life, to get to the last impact. Maybe at 3, it's hard to tell with the black sleeves, but still, there's the raid Crollo, able to take advantage of Shalnark's ability to free play back the Franklin, sap everything by 500, swinging for impact, and an active trigger saves the day, playing it up to the Gon to protect from impact, and that should be it for Phantom Troop. Only 1 more impact to go. What are the odds it's going to be double final? Playing the raid Gon and then raiding it to get a second impact just for security purposes. Double impact swinging in, and it is going to be enough to end the game. So with 2 wins under our belt, we move into the final round of play. Not going to be playing off against another Hunter deck, I hope. And it looks like that will be the case, as it's going to be a very scary round 3 opponent in Purple Toguro from Yu Yu Hakusho. This deck is crazy. The ability to high roll an 8-cost raid and shave his required energy down to as low as 2 if you are able to high roll correctly, makes this a very scary opponent that anyone would have to face off against, even if your deck is very powerful, something like Yellow Ava or Purple Shadow Army. This deck can absolutely come out of nowhere and annihilate you in an instant. Already having to redraw, unfortunately, the hand was very full of raids and colors. It's going to come back to bite us, but it looks like this hand is going to be doing a little bit better, starting off with the Zepiel to draw discard, drawing one of the extra Karapikas we have. Again, as long as you have the one and it sits on your back row, you don't need to worry about having multiple copies of it, and that's free discard fodder for your Zepiel. We're just going to set the energy line with the Killua and the Karapika here, 2 of the required 4 names for the deck. But one of the big MVPs for the Toguro deck is going to be that one sitting on the back row, not the Karasu that moves up, but will be the other one, the Toguro, which is arguably the strongest 1-cost card in the game, a 1/1 4000 that is able to generate energy on the front line if it sidelines something through its own effect. That could be very powerful in late game stages as you actively want to sideline the Elder Toguro to start reducing the younger Toguro's cost in your hand. You can do it by 2 for every time that the Toguro Elder has been sidelined and bounces back to the hand. And there it is, dropping right there. You're going to sideline to generate the energy on the front line. And then the Elder Toguro is able to discard a card out of the hand to add itself back to the hand. So already generating 3 energy on the field. With the Toguro cost cut down by 1, it's just going to play a copy of Dr. Ichigaki in the back row to get that extra energy generating, and we are going to hit a Raid Out of Life, but decide not to play it, as if we did play it on one of the back row cards, we would be starved for energy. Unfortunately, drawing into the Zepiel for turn means that you would have been fine to play the Raid on the front line and save yourself an action point. So at this point, then we're starting to get a little bit gummed up in the hand. 2 Raid Gons. And a color Gon as well as an AP flipper and the Karapika as well. Going to raid the Gon here to boost it up to impact. Of course, the Toguro can't block, but we just had to special it anyway. As the Gon will swing in to take that first damage. And a purple color trigger Out of Life is able to free play back the Toguro that we just worked to destroy. And in a non-trigger Out of Life, of course, the Toguro cannot block anything with 4,000 or more BP, or 4,000 or less BP, but can block anything over 4,000. Of course, the Gon swinging in would have been impact, so not necessarily throwing up a block would have been the smartest idea. Play a copy of Byakko on the back row, sideline off the effect of Toguro, means that you essentially get to draw 2 cards as well as generating energy on the front line. So right now, Toguro is generating 4 energy, but the cost is still an 8 cost. An AP flipper is going to then play an Elder Toguro. And this is what the deck, when I meant earlier that it can high roll, is that it can fan through its deck relatively quickly with that 1/1 card to draw cards, and essentially finding the finals in the deck. You're able to keep using them again and again as you find them. Right now, the Toguro has been knocked 2 in the hand, and yet another AP flipper to free play the Elder once again. And now the Raid Toguro drops as early as the 3rd turn. He's going to take out the Raid Gon and swing in with impact and damage 3 on a 5,000. The Gon has been knocked by 1,000, so it's down to just 2,000 on the front line and won't be able to block anything. So just taking the impact here, hitting a Raid, obviously no targets, and then a special here to take out the Raid Toguro instead of the 1/1 Toguro, as the Raid will prove to be a bigger challenge to take out as it is sitting at 5k. Unfortunately, the problem that we're starting to find in this scenario is that we don't have enough raid targets with Gon. Our hand is completely filled up with other names in the deck, but no Gons to speak of. We see Karapika as well as Leorio. And we're going to play the Leorio to the front line. He obviously generates energy on the front line, just walling up here after using a Hunter license, restands some action points, and then playing 2 Karapikas on the front line to wall up. And the Zepiel, of course, gets the free swing because the Toguros cannot block anything weak. So trying to keep in this game, but it is a very uphill battle against these strong cards in the Toguros. Going to start with playing a Karasu. Toguro uses the effect to sideline the Elder once again to draw a card. And then the Toguro goes back to the hand. Also see a copy of Sakyo, which will be drop in right now, which allows you to free play if something has been sidelined this turn to free play the Elder Toguro. Going to activate Not Bad again to free play. Restand some action points, and then the Karasu allowing you to draw 2 cards if anything on your front line is 3,000 or less, and 100% of 100% just to take care of the Leorio, which ultimately will end up screwing us in the long run, as the hand is completely full of Raid Gons, Color Gons, and no babies in the hand to speak of, so generating 3 energy, and it will not be enough as we draw and have to take the extra draw, but cannot get out of the hole. And we'll just have to go to combat and swing the 4000s. And hitting an active trigger, unfortunately, will just be enough to wrap things up for Toguro. As with only one life left, any other raid that's going to drop on the board should just be enough, as it's going to be impact damage 3. So sideline the Elder to add it back to the hand. Free play the Karasu as a double energy generator, and then, of course, raiding the Toguro to pop the Kurapika and raid a Karasu for a good measure to draw a few more cards, swinging in for the impact damage 3, and that will take the game 3. So here we are after our 3-round tournament, and honestly, pretty satisfied with the results. Going 2-1 in 3 rounds was definitely not what I was expecting with this deck, and only dropping the one match against Toguro versus going 2-0 against the other decks in Hunter x Hunter was very surprising. Now that we've had a chance to see the deck in action, we can break things down with the pros and cons of this deck, starting, of course, with the pros. First, the deck is quick. With green buddies only needing to get up to a maximum of 5 energy, the amount of early damage this deck can put up against your opponent through straight up blitzing them is very powerful. Second, the deck can be overbearing in terms of BP. Both raid Gons can catapult characters on your board to astronomical amounts of BP, making it tougher for your opponent to block with the cards they wanted to. Normally a 4,000 or even a 5,000 BP raid would be an easy block against any other deck, but not the case with this one, as they have to now be a little bit more conservative in choosing to block with some of those characters. And third, the deck is great for nostalgia. Going back in time to see one of the first decks in the game of Union Arena and essentially one of the building blocks for a lot of other future sets was really a treat and honestly a lot of fun to play. And now for the cons. First, it's extremely power crept. Being one of the original sets in the game meant that it was a building block for a lot of other future set designs. That being said, deck design and functionality was kept at a very safe level because you wouldn't want to start off your brand new trading card game with a very high power ceiling. Even with all the new cards and support this deck has gotten, it's still not enough to catapult it to a top tier contender. Second, it's very name centralized. As we saw back in the Phantom Troop match, we were never really able to get a full advantage of our cards because we never had a Killua on our board at any time. In any other match, missing names could be the difference between a mediocre effect or even no effect at all if you don't have the necessary characters on the board. This is the case for a lot of other decks in Union Arena that revolve around names as their sole focus, such as the Red Choso deck from Jujutsu Kaisen Volume 2, and even the Yellow Integrity Knights deck from Sword Art Online. And third, the deck crumbles against stronger decks. While this is really an obvious statement for why a deck isn't seeing competitive play, we witnessed it back in the Toguro match that without key pieces on the board, or really even an oppressive threat at that, you'll be playing catch up the entire time, and when you finally do get that key piece, your opponent can simply just deal with it with the amount of resources they've been stockpiling over time because you haven't been pressuring them enough. Overall, this was a great deck to start things off with. I truly had a blast doing this, and if you enjoyed the video at any point, feel free to leave a like or a comment down below. Subscribe to the channel as we have a lot of fun UA content on the horizon, and hopefully, we'll see you in the next one.